Good morning. Let's take a deep breath and pat yourselves on the back because we are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where we're here to empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose. How are we doing this morning, Jared?
I'm a little underdressed again, Ollie. This is 2 times in a row you showed up in a suit, so I got to start figuring out your rhythm here. You're looking good, my friend. I appreciate that intro, and it always gets me excited to help some other people find purpose. So what do we got? What do we got today, Ollie? What do you think we're at?
Well, our topic for today is advice, giving and getting advice. Just a reminder, the main differentiator for our podcast is the homework. So if you haven't gotten last week's homework in, which was identifying what you're doing on a weekly basis for your time, mind, and happiness, make sure to get that in at onpurpose.official@gmail.com. But yeah, let's dive right into the advice. So the first question that I have for you today, Jared, is tell us about a time where you have given advice without qualification.
I think that's that's interesting to me. I think if we all look back at our lives, one place that stands out to me is usually teenagers, right? When teenagers give each other advice on what they should do, and neither of them know anything more than their 14 or 15 years of life. So I'm sure I was guilty there. I think, to me, it's something that I'm really cognizant of and I pay attention to is who's giving me advice and who am I taking advice from, and then who do I give advice to. And I think you mature with it over time. You start to realize the value of your advice is actually in your experience, not just your opinion. So I don't know if I could pinpoint. I'm sure my brother or sister would tell you a time I gave them advice on what to do just for my entertainment, and they did it, and it didn't work out so well. But I don't know specific. Do you have a specific memory of a time you gave advice?
I mean, I can tell you throughout high school, I was handing out horrible advice to everybody I came in contact with. I mean, I think here's a really good little rule that I learned from a guy named Ty Lopez. Have you heard about that guy?
Is he Hollywood?
Yeah. He's always on the YouTube commercials and stuff. Anyway, some of his stuff I don't like, but there is a lot of really good content that he puts out there. And one of the things that I had heard him say was a 33% rule. So he talks about spending a third of your time with people who are mentees to you below your level to where you have more knowledge of the subject matter, 33% of your time with peers, people that are on your level, and then the last third with mentors. So I think now I've done a much better job of only giving advice when I know that my knowledge of that specific topic or subject is most likely higher than the person I'm giving advice to, right? I wouldn't want to give any business advice to someone who's been a CEO or a leader of a company longer than I have, particularly. Maybe in a specific area, but I try to gauge it like that. But to answer your question, I can't really think of, at least recently, a time where I was just giving horrible advice.
No, but I think if we all reflect back to our teenage years, we're like, oh man, I shouldn't have told Billy to do that. That was the dumbest idea ever. But at the time, you were the most logical person for Billy to listen to. And that's one of the things I try to get across to my kids and the teenagers I get to mentor and stuff is look at who you're getting advice from. If the person that's giving you advice is in the same predicament you are, they're probably not the best person to get you out of that predicament because they're in it as well. And I think as you age and you get a little older and like start getting some success, you get humbled a little bit to realize, hey, this is a time to be quiet and listen, not share advice. But then you also recognize, like you said, the place where you can help somebody and the place where you're actually going to receive legitimate advice. But I think we've got to do better in today's world coaching people on when to take advice because you can get it all over. You can go to YouTube for it. Social media can give you advice. Your personal relationships, you can get advice, but who are the people giving you advice? So how do you, because you're doing a great job, right? I see you, if you're not following Ali, you need to start following. You'll learn some stuff, but I see you doing exactly what you said. I see you meeting with mentors. I see you mentoring. How do you decide who you're going to take advice from?
For me, I decide I'll take advice from them if they have achieved what I'm looking to achieve with given advice. For example, one of my mentors is the CEO of a local company who is a worldwide company, 60 plus employees. They've done millions of dollars in revenue, and that's where I'm trying to take my company, right? To be a multi-million dollar revenue generating company, to have more employees, to be more global. So for him, he's done all of these things. And with mentors especially, I like to meet with them and almost interview them, ask them a lot of questions about their achievements, their background, even their personal lives, right? Outside of business, what are your primary modalities? And you'll find a lot of them will say health. Health is always a big factor, because if you're not feeling good, you won't perform well, right? Yeah. So health is always a big thing, but it's really if they have achieved what I'm looking for to get that advice from. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good. Let me follow up with that before we switch. Would you take advice from somebody who competed in your arena, whatever it is you're trying to learn, but they didn't succeed?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely I would. And we also have to define, what does take advice mean?
Sure.
Right? Because we can hear something and it doesn't necessarily mean, like, for example, if somebody that competed and he's telling me about his mistakes, I might take that advice, but I'm obviously not going to go make the same mistakes that he did. I think that anyone who has maybe knowledge or experience in an area that you're trying to get better at, they're worth listening to. But as far as executing on specific advice, like, hey, you need to go and join this organization, or you need to go and set up a meeting with this person, I'll definitely have a little bit more of a criteria for actually executing on specific advice. I would say a 5+ years experience at least in certain things before I'm actually like, okay, you said this, but
yeah, and that's a good point as far as streamlining who you're going to take it from and filtering people out. I think too many of us get caught up in taking advice from too many people on everything, right? Because advice is only good if you can act on it. So for me, one of the things I try to do is I identify who's in my circle. Like, there's certain people I'm going to listen to, and there's certain people that are going to share opinions that I'm going to discount, because we don't have that trust, right? And kind of like you said, they haven't done what they're giving advice about, which is a big thing for me. I don't necessarily care if you've been super successful at it, or if you tried it and it didn't work out. I can learn from that, but you have got to have at least competed. If you're giving advice on something you read about, something somebody else told you, that's not something I'm really interested in. I think too many people get caught up in that area. They have opinions on everything, which is much different than advice. To me, advice comes from action and learning. An opinion everybody can have on everything. Yeah,
definitely. I wanted to ask you, because frankly, you're one of my relationships that most of it I'm receiving mentorship from you. You know, I think with you as a new business owner, I do feel that we're at that kind of peer level.
Yeah.
But you being my coach in MMA, a lot of your experience just as a father, just having a lot of experiences, I know that you're a very high level in a lot of areas. So for you specifically, how do you decide when, all right, I'm taking advice from this person?
I listen more than I talk, right? And I think it goes back to one of the episodes. I'll have to get you the number and the notes, but we talked about knowing yourself before you can have relationships with other people, right? We talked about in the relationship episode, knowing yourself got you through the breakup. Was it episode 5, Alex? Yeah, there you go, episode 5. Listen to that one. I know myself, right? I have businesses. I make mistakes in my businesses. I learn from them, but I don't have all the answers. So if we're talking business, I can learn from you. Right, and that's a place where I'm going to be more quiet and listen and take notes and observe. On the mats, I have more experience. So when you come there, that's a place for me to give. So I think it comes back to knowing who you are and knowing what you're good at and what you're learning at, and not crossing the two up. I'm not going to walk into a business place and tell them all my opinions on things, like you said earlier, to get laughed out of the room. But conversely, if they come into the gym, like that's a place I feel I can help them. If they're wanting to find purpose and stuff, I can steer that a little bit. So I think it comes back to really being comfortable with who you are, where you're at in the process, and then learning along the way.
Yeah, I love how you always bring up awareness is the first step to living life with more purpose in any endeavor. You have to be aware.
You have to, and I think that's where, think about this. Let's go back to our teenage example. Why do teenagers listen and put so much weight on the opinion of everybody else? Their peers, their teachers, the kids they don't even like that are in a different social group say something to them and carry so much weight. Why does that impact them so much?
Because they don't know who they are.
They're figuring out who they are. Right now, I know who I am.
Right.
Now, am I evolving? Yes. And as I evolve, will I shift circles? Certainly. Mm-hmm. But knowing who I am allows me to put myself in positions to learn and to lead.
Right.
And knowing which circle I'm in at the time. I will tell you an issue I have, though, is, and I think you guys will find this in your life, especially as you progress, there's a lot more people that want to take information from you and want your advice. There's much fewer that want to give you advice. And you actually actively have to seek that out. And that's kind of something that I'm still working on is, okay, how do I get more people into that group where they're leading me so that I continue to evolve?
Yeah, I love what you said about you listen more than you speak. Right? God made us with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Right? And I think you're right on that. And I think that a lot of people are giving advice when they don't necessarily have the experience. Right? They may have the knowledge. They may have read a book, and then they're like, "Oh, hey man, do this," but they haven't tried it themselves yet. So I think,
and I would even disagree there. I would venture to say most people getting advice haven't even read a book. Yeah. They're sharing opinions or a YouTube video or just, you know what they're sharing a lot of times? Think about this. They're sharing their fears, right? If you have a crazy idea and you share it with me, and I've had that idea, but I've been afraid to act. I've had the impulse to do something better, but I play it safe. What advice do I give you? Right? I'm going to tell you to play it safe. And that's one of the things that I've always been hyper aware of, and it comes from my childhood. My dad played life safe. No matter what idea I had, the first thing I knew I would get from him was all the reasons it wouldn't work. Mm-hmm. And then I would be like, well, I'm going to make it work to prove all those are not true.
Right.
But when I look back, what was he trying to do? It wasn't he was trying to be malicious with the advice. He's just trying to protect you from the fear of failure, right? And, oh, man, your feelings are getting hurt. If it doesn't work, you might physically get hurt. So sometimes that advice people are giving is very conservative. It's why it can't happen. And it's not necessarily done in an evil manner. It's done to try to protect you. Mm-hmm. But in reality, they're hurting you.
Right.
Because you're not getting to the purpose of what you're here to do. You're not taking those risks.
And there's a big difference between advice and opinions, right? One of my best friends, my first roommate after college when I first got in the oil and gas industry, he's a country guy from East Texas, and he would always say, anytime he gave me advice, he would always say, now, this is just one asshole's opinion. and I loved how he would always say that because it's true.
So you knew.
Right. Most of the time, unless this person is fit to be an advisor, right? I like to say 5+ years experience in whatever area, right? You're qualified to be an advisor. Then it's just an opinion. It's just an opinion. Even if you're taking the facts from a book, the fact that you think that's right is your opinion, right? Unless you've taken time, preferably years, to experience and say, hey, this worked for me, this didn't. Here's what I would advise you to do. And even advice is still somewhat of an opinion, right? Based on your own experience, your own perspective. So it's very important. Again, back to that self-awareness. You got to know yourself thoroughly before you know what advice is good for you to take.
Not only do you got to know yourself, but you got to know where you're trying to get. Mm-hmm. What are you trying to achieve? What is the roadmap? What does success look like, and how are we going to get there? And then put yourself in circles where people have done that. We don't have to recreate everything. We can learn a lot of lessons from other people on our own path. And I think we just got to be better at knowing ourselves first, so that when people give us advice, we can filter it through. Does this meet what I'm looking for, or is this an opinion? And I think sometimes we just get in the habit of just taking it and, oh, this person said it, so I have to just listen. And I think, honestly, we're conditioned that way.
Yeah.
I think our schools are shifting a little bit to more critical thinking. But, when I went to school, it was all about memorization. I don't know why I'm memorizing this. They just told me to memorize it.
Right.
Well, I didn't develop critical thinking. I think to my teacher friends out there and those still working with my kids, if you're developing critical thinking in your children and you're developing that, hey, this is his opinion, but it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be my opinion type attitude, and I can analyze it and it's not offensive and it's not wrong, those are the kids that are going to thrive. And that's the thinking we need moving forward.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. What do you think is it's like this camera thing. What do you think is, or let me backtrack before we get to that. What are some outcomes of some of these experiences you've had, whether it was giving specifically advice where you were unqualified or receiving advice that was unqualified or qualified? Maybe an outcome or scenario to where you remember giving or receiving advice, whether positive or negative, but tell us about a time where it was impactful, whether it was positive or negative.
That's interesting. Well, I'll tell you, most of the times it resulted in me doing crazy shit that I shouldn't have been doing. And you look back to your early 20s, late teens, when you're still kind of finding your identity. And, honestly, a lot of things I regret doing in my life were based on the opinions of others or input I got, or just or honestly not even having an opinion, just kind of following into the flow of what everybody else was doing. As far as giving advice, man, I have a tough time thinking of, honestly, some of our listeners out there can probably send in a time I gave you dumbass advice and how it worked out for you, because you probably remember better than I do. Man, I think most of the time I took advice that I shouldn't have, or I gave advice that I shouldn't have. The results were awful.
Yeah.
I can't think of one like traumatic time, but
what about a great time?
A great time on advice,
where either you gave it or received it, and then the outcome was really good.
Man, what about you? You got one at the top of your head?
Yeah, well, that 33% rule, and that mixed with being told by peers and very few mentors was huge. I mean, getting the advice to spend a third of my time or more of my time with mentors was huge. And frankly, the reason why I have more opportunities like this, to get dressed up, to be giving speeches, presentations, going to more high-level events, like today, this afternoon, signed up with a Chamber of Commerce event to go listen to the CEO of Canvas Credit Union, and they bring in, I think it's between $2 to $3 billion a year right here in Fort Collins. And that has been the result of, who sent that to me? A mentor, right? Someone who's on a higher level. So that has been probably the most fantastic advice or outcome that I've received from listening to advice, because I used to have this as a wrestler, single sport, put the team on my back. I can do it all myself, right? As a very young business owner, started my business when I was 24 years old. I had just turned 24. So at that young of an age, there was and I'm still really young, right? Still so much for me to learn. Trying to do all of that without any mentorship in my day-to-day, I realized pretty quickly the first 2, almost 3 years of the business, I didn't really have many mentors. It was very few. And if you see the progression after I started getting mentors is when I'm making a lot more of the right moves. They really shortened that learning curve because they've been there, they've done that. So the mentorship piece has been one of the best pieces of advice I've ever received.
Yeah, and now that listening to you and thinking, probably the best mentorship I ever had was I was 12 or 13 years old, and I was a super angry kid. I had a lot going on in life, and I wasn't on the right path for sure. I was getting in a lot of trouble, and a guy named Bruce, who volunteered at our youth center, took me under his wing with no benefit to him. And, I look back, and his just being there and the advice he gave definitely put me on a new course in my life. So I would say that's the best time I ever listened, is like when I was 12 or 13. And that's something I've talked about that before on other formats. And that really set my life on a whole new course. Not only did I learn from him and I get back on the path that I was supposed to be on, but it also gave me perspective as an adult that I need to repay him for what he did for me by being involved in other people's life with no expectation of benefit to me. And that's probably the best advice I ever got. And it wasn't really sit down and here's your advice. It was more mentoring through example and being there.
Can you say that piece of advice again? Because I think that's really good, and I want our listeners.
Mentoring by example. Yeah, he was just there. You know, he had a van full of angry little 12 and 13-year-old boys that were destined for failure in life, and instead of pulling back and watching us fail, he invested his time with us, knowing it would not benefit him in any way.
Mm-hmm. That's the piece I was looking for. I think that piece of advice of giving without expecting anything in return. I think that is extremely powerful. And from a selfish standpoint, for those of you that are like, what? You know, why would I ever do that? I need to gain something out of it. Look at it this way, to where when you do that and you can put yourself in that mindset of giving without expecting anything in return, it comes back tenfold. And I'm speaking from experience to where I've barely gotten there recently. How can I add value to you? That's what I say to everybody that I come in contact with. How can I help you? What can I do to give you value? Because it's the law of reciprocation, right? Again, from a selfish standpoint, if you're looking out for yourself, if you have that mindset of giving without expecting anything in return, you are looking out for yourself. You will get something in return, but getting in that mindset is extremely important. So thanks.
Yeah, so that was interesting. Yeah, and that, you know, at some point we'll talk more about that story because it's a pretty cool story. But I think that kind of goes back to that selfless or selfish. There's times to be both in life, but you're absolutely right. The more you give, the more you're going to get in this world, and it fulfills you, right? Like you're not going to get necessarily tangible things all the time, but you're going to get that purpose, that deeper meaning of, man, I helped somebody with their life, and think about the weight that has when somebody comes to you and says, hey, because of you, I did this, or I didn't do that. And that's pretty impactful. And that, you know, to me, I think as a world, if we start to care more about the people we're around and less about the things we can get, we're in a better place. And then there's plenty for everybody. You know, this idea, especially, you know, you and I have talked about this business-wise, that there's only a limited number of resources and I got to get it all to myself. And there's plenty of success for everybody. You just got to get out there and get after it and want it, and then be willing to work hard for it.
Yeah, so much success out there. We live in an abundant world, and everyone doesn't want the same things.
No.
You know, so there's plenty to go around for everyone. Jared, what would you say you use, especially for our listeners now, as a qualifier, right? When do you know I'm qualified to give advice here? And when do you know this person's qualified to give me advice here?
Yeah, first one, when do I give advice, is similar to what you said earlier. If they're trying to get a place I've already been, you know, if they're trying to get into police work, they're trying to make a difference in their community, they're trying to figure out how to transition from one career to another. Like, I've been there, I can do that. If they're interested in fighting, I've done that. So then I'm qualified, right? And I think, you know, inside, like at least I do, if I'm speaking, I'm like, whoa, I'm out of my league here. I need to stop. Or if like, hey, this is something I've done. Here's kind of what worked for me. Here's what didn't work for me. And I guess that's how I like to give advice, is not absolutes, but more, hey, I tried this and had good results, or I tried that and it didn't work out so much, so I'd maybe tweak this, but I give it to them in an open format so they can take it, assimilate it, and put it to their product. So that's when I give advice. Getting advice, my wife is always on me about this. She says I'm way too judgmental. It might just be the way I am. But if somebody's never done what they're talking about, I'll be honest, I'm not going to listen. And the example I have is when we first moved here, we were looking for a new doctor for our kids. And I walked in, and no offense, but the doctor was at least 100 pounds overweight. Not interested. like I was like, hey, this isn't going to work for us. Turned around and walked out. And my wife's like, why did we do that? I was like, how can he be invested in my physical health if he's not invested in his physical health? And what kind of opinions would he be giving me? Literally what he read about in a book, but nothing he's practicing. So to me, I really look for who are the practitioners, and that's who I want to learn from.
Yeah, so I'd like to challenge your point. What would you say about, I see some MMA and even some bodybuilding coaches who apparently are these great coaches, and they look out of shape. And I agree with you, but what would you say about some of those who have maybe built a good reputation in the past and then I guess have let themselves go but are still giving advice on something that they used to have experience in but may not look the part?
Yeah, I think they competed, right? They have at least experience there. Now, I'm not saying you're always going to be in peak physical fitness, right? I mean, we all have ups and downs. But you would be able to look at them and see the athlete, right? Maybe they're 30 pounds heavier than they were when they competed. Maybe they enjoy food more now because they cut weight a bunch when they're younger. Like, I'm good with that. But the knowledge of the competition is there.
Right.
On the flip side, if you're my age or younger than me and you're way out of shape,
no excuse.
Don't come tell me about my fitness.
Yeah.
Right? Don't tell me I need to eat less protein because my kidneys can only digest so much you know what I mean? Like, don't come at me with your nutrition when I'm looking at you and you're not practicing it.
Yeah, I agree. And I appreciate that you, Coach Ryan, Coach Steve, Charles MMA, everybody's still about it no matter what your age is, right? You're in there fighting with us, training. So that's definitely something that goes a long way for me. And I'm very similar in the fact I would like to, and I think I spoke about it in a previous podcast, be a little bit more on your end of the spectrum in terms of, I'm walking out. I don't think I'd ever walk out on a doctor like that if he was overweight. But I would like to have a little bit more of that strict filter for what I'm taking in, because I think you're absolutely right. Why settle? Right? Why not try and get advice from the best source that you possibly can?
And that's something I've developed over time, and I think most of us will, is the realization that my time is truly the most important commodity I have. And if I know right from the beginning it's not going to work or I'm not interested, I've gotten better at not spending my time there because I don't get it back. And especially, talking with you and learning from you, Ali, is if I'm supposed to be working on my business and I spend time over here not working on my business, the business doesn't move forward, right? The same thing applies to your life. If you know you're supposed to go on a run, but instead of going on a run, you watch YouTube videos of the correct running techniques because you're still processing information, getting all this advice, but you don't ever take action, you're no better, right? I mean, you have the information, but you got to put it into practice. And a lot of my life and the changes I've made is I just don't want to have regrets at the end of my days. And wasting time is regretful to me. Yeah. It's literally a regret. Think of listeners, how many of you guys have gone to bed at night and you have trouble going to sleep because you didn't get the most out of that day? You binge watch Netflix, you did this, and your to-do list is still there. And the to-do list was actually going to move your life forward. It could bring in more revenue. It could create new relationships. And instead, we did all the stupid stuff. And I'm guilty of it, don't get me wrong. But those nights that I can't sleep because I didn't do what I was supposed to do, man, that's heavy on me. And I don't want that. I want to sleep peacefully every night. And I always ask my wife in the morning, how'd you sleep? And she's always like, oh, kind of good. Because she thinks all the time. She's like, how about you? I was like, man, if sleeping was an Olympic sport, I'm a gold medalist. Because I go to bed at this time and I get up at that time.
Nice.
And I try to exhaust myself during the day doing what I'm supposed to do.
Fantastic advice from experience.
Yeah, I think, but you do the same thing, man. And Alex, everybody's coming on purpose with us is not here by accident, right? And that means we're all going to move forward as a big collective community. So let's get going. Let's self-assess, figure out where we're at. Let's start looking at all the other relationships we have, the information we're processing, where we've been, and then set out a new roadmap for where we're going to go. And let's be selective on who's going to advise us on how to get there. And more importantly, who's going to try to talk us out of not doing it.
Exactly. And it starts with that circle of five, right? Go back and listen to that podcast. Who's around you? Because that's where the advice is coming from. Who's on your social media feed? What are you income media consumption? Go back to that podcast. So all of this is cohesive. I feel like all these topics that we talk about, to where you improve that, guess what? You're going to improve the caliber of advice that you're consuming.
Right. And I think I hope the listeners find it to be real, because there's a lot of bullshit out there, right? A lot of self-help gurus and gimmicks that you stand in the mirror and you tell yourself you're good enough, I'm great enough, and dang on it, people like me. And the reality is they don't.
Yep.
And if you don't change what you're doing, talking to yourself better isn't going to help. Now, don't get me wrong. I love positive thinking. I love that positive voice. But it only works if it feeds action. And that's what we're about on this podcast, is creating action, creating homework, creating accountability, and moving ourselves forward. Because too many people have been standing there practicing being good, telling themselves they're good, telling themselves they're going to change, but not actually doing it. We're about doing it.
More action, less planning. Just execute. It's never going to be the perfect time, the perfect weather, the perfect day. No, just execute. So with that, why don't we jump into the homework piece?
Yeah, let's go. I want the listeners to take inventory, and you're going to hear that term a lot, right? We're going to say take inventory on a lot of things, because I think that's really what you're doing, right? You're going into that closet of memories, that closet of experiences that we don't necessarily look at a lot. And I want you to look on the shelves and find out, oh, here's where I gave advice and I was unqualified. Or here's where I took advice and I was unqualified. So I want us to do that. Like, let's look in and see what are some times we gave advice that we shouldn't have, or we weren't qualified. And where, more importantly to me, where are those times that we were listening to advice from people that weren't qualified to get it, give it to us? And then what were the results of those?
Quick side note, Jared. Why do you think that we focus on the homework for this one and for other ones is taking inventory of the times where it was bad advice as opposed to good?
Well, I think you learn more from failures, right? If you're super successful, do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just replicate success. But most of us wouldn't be here if everything worked perfectly.
Yep.
And the real world is just not going to work perfectly. Murphy's Law is not going to work perfectly. Mother Nature's not going to work perfectly. Like, there's always going to be a wrench in your system. The true life you're meant to live comes from how do you handle failures?
Yep.
How do you bounce back when things doesn't go right or don't go right? Yep. Because everybody does well if they're successful, but where does society split? Right in the middle, when adversity hits, and one group moves forward and learns, the other group stays here. They stay behind it and they become a victim of it, right? Oh, I would have been this if only that would have happened. Well, guess what? That can happen, but you got to change.
Yep, and I knew he was going to say that too, because he always says that in the gym, and it's so important to look at the losses, to look at the mistakes. So to recap the homework that Jared just mentioned, step one, think of 2 to 3 scenarios where you have given advice without qualification. Step two, think of 2 to 3 scenarios where you have listened to advice from someone and who was not qualified. And then the last step is write out 2 to 3 sentences about what the results were in each scenario and email it to us. That's holding you accountable, even if it's not featured. Email it to us, because that extra step that you take, then it becomes real, right? You're putting it out into the world when you send that email to onpurpose.official@gmail.com. So just like Jared said, it's about taking that action. You can get all the knowledge in the world, but if you're not going out there, if you're not doing the homework, if you're not talking to that person, if you're not taking action, it is worthless.
Truth. Right? You can process information all day, but you're not going to learn until you get out there and you act. And a lot of times you're going to learn when you come up short. Those are going to be the best teachers in life. So, I hope people get after this. And let's not just be here for entertainment. I know Ali's sharp dress and his opening's fantastic. I love it. But that's just to get you in the door to becoming who you want to be. And it's self-assessment, being aware of where we're headed. And then being accountable to the team here. You know, when you share that homework, we may not always share it on the actual podcast, but we'll follow up with you. We'll give you some input, some advice, but it means you're taking action. And that's what we're after. So I appreciate you guys being here again today. Remember, team, life is too short for us to live any other way than on purpose. So we will see you all next week as we dive deeper into creating a life we want to live.
Amen.
This has been the On Purpose Podcast. If you'd like to follow up on this week's action items or give your feedback, please reach us by email, which is in the description below. If you'd like to keep up with Jared or Ollie, check out their Instagram accounts, both of which are in the description below. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.